Live, we're in a break in Florida, and in the state of Florida versus Keith Johansson. This is the case of a husband accused of killing his wife. The prosecution says the reason he killed his wife is because they were fighting over some infidelity in the days leading up to what the state says is a murder. The defense originally said they didn't know what happened. At least the defendant did. We heard him tell the police, tell his parents, I don't know, I was in the shower and I came out and I heard the gunshots. Well, now the defendant says he did it. He killed his wife. Why? Because she was in a drug-induced psychotic episode and he had to protect himself. She had a gun, so he grabbed his gun and unfortunately he had to kill her. That's the story that he's now telling. Joining us to discuss what we've seen so far today, criminal defense attorney Adam Stone. He's in Bucyrus, Ohio, and civil rights attorney and former prosecutor Arick Fudali is in New York City. Arick, welcome to you. This idea that you can change your story, yeah, it's possible, right? You could say, yes, I lied at the beginning because I was nervous and I didn't think anyone would believe me. However, when you're lying to your parents and the jury is listening to you lie to investigators and your parents repeatedly, and at one point blaming possibly, well, what about the 6-year-old? Anybody rule him out? How do you get over this? When he takes the stand, jurors are going to really need a performance out of him if they're going to believe it.
You're absolutely right. So far, I think I've counted 4 different stories the defendant has told in this case as to how his wife was killed. First, of course, he reportedly told police that she shot herself twice. Then he changed it. No, maybe it was the neighbor. And then there was, of course, no evidence of that. Then maybe it was the stepson. Nope, no evidence of that. And now his defense attorney is saying, no, it was him, but it was justifiable use of force. In my experience as a trial attorney, juries hate liars. They hate being lied to. The defendant here is going to have to admit to at least lying 3 times. He's got a real uphill battle ahead of him.
Adam, at that point, the lying is so uncomfortable when he's telling his parents he doesn't know anything. And if this story were true, if the self-defense story was a true story, it's more believable than she shot herself twice. I mean, why not tell that tale out of the gate? Is that an issue?
Well, yes, it's an issue. And to your question as to why not tell that story out of the gate, because that's not what happened. And it's very clear after listening to that video, watching his demeanor as his dad does a wonderful interrogation, quite frankly, of him, appealing to right and wrong, heaven and hell. I was taking notes, appeals to logic, justice, and he sticks to this story all the while. He is just looking manic, frantic. There's no tears. There's nothing to suggest that he had to do this. There was some love that he still loved this woman. There was nothing from the emotional side. Even on that call, when he suggests the 6-year-old might have killed his wife, there's still no emotion there. There's nothing there that would lead us to believe that he felt any degree of remorse for having to do what he did. And that's ultimately what self-defense is really about. It's an affirmative defense saying, I had to. And this was the love of his life. This was his wife. It's unbelievable.
Arick, the prosecution made a point of accentuating for the jury after that audio was played when he brings up maybe the 6-year-old did it. Has anyone looked into that? Good move by the prosecution to reiterate to the jury, yeah, you heard that right, jurors. He blamed the kid.
Absolutely. It's an excellent job by the prosecution. And frankly, the defendant is making the prosecution pretty easy in this case. They're basically just giving the prosecution things to give to the jury. He keeps changing his story. A defense has to pick a story and go with it. And he's just not doing it. He's making it easy on the prosecution. And the prosecution is doing a great job of exploiting that, of showing, listen, he even came up with a stepson as a possible murderer here. Nothing that he said has made sense. His demeanor has been terrible in these videos and these calls while his parents plead with him to show remorse, to just stop lying, to be honest. He's just destroying his own case and making it very easy on the prosecution to prove his guilt.
Adam, apparently there was a deal on the table even leading up to trial, on the eve of trial, that the defense turned down, this individual turned down. How do you negotiate that with a client of yours that you know that this story is not likely going to sell in front of a jury? and there is a deal on the table. Is it difficult when someone does not want to spend any time in prison and they're willing to roll the dice? How do you negotiate that? How do you present deals to a client that's unwilling?
Well, first thing you do in this situation is you sit down and you have the conversation. You have the very honest, difficult conversation. And you let your client know straight up, you're going to lose. There's a high likelihood here that you're going to lose. And I highly suggest that you take this deal. It's the only deal to really save your life. And you try to get them to understand that this is their entire life. From this breath till your very last one you take, you will be incarcerated. And that's what you feel as a professional, as someone who has tried these cases multiple times. But ultimately, that person, this gentleman, he's a grown man. This defendant is a grown man. He can make that decision for himself. And for me as a defense attorney, when I feel that strongly that I'm going to lose a case and that defendant is pushing me in to taking that case to trial, I make them sign off on it, that they know that I recommended, do not take this case to trial, take this offer. And at that point, he goes forward.
Up to him.
We got a job to do.
Yeah. And, he's 39 now. The deal, I believe, was 25, hard time, and then eligibility kicks in there. If he's found guilty, he's done for the rest of his days. Let's slip in a quick break here before the jury gets back. We'll get you live into the courtroom when we return. Stay with us. This is Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to our live coverage of day 2 of the prosecution's case in Florida versus Keith Johansen. The judge is back at the bench. Jury is back at the courtroom. Another witness has just been called. We're expecting the state to wrap up at some point today after a firearm expert. Let's listen in.
Spelled D-R-A-G-A.
Can you tell us where you work, ma'am?
I work for the crime laboratory in Jacksonville, Florida, for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
What do you do at the crime laboratory?
My title is a senior crime laboratory analyst, and my duties are the examination of firearms for function and the examination of fired ammunition components to determine whether or not bullets or cartridge cases were fired in a single firearm or whether they were fired in a particular firearm submitted to the laboratory.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and then maybe some of your training to become a crime lab analyst?
So I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and in Biology, and particular to the area of firearms identification, I underwent an 18-month training program under the supervision of an experienced analyst at FDLE. And at the completion of that training program, I was certified to do independent casework in the area of firearms analysis.
Do you go through proficiency testing to ensure that you know what you're doing?
Yes, I do.
Let me ask you, through how long have you been in the firearms section, specifically analyzing firearms and/or fired components to each other?
So I completed that 18-month training program in early 2008, and I've been doing the work ever since.
Roughly over that 13-year time frame, can you estimate how many examinations to include firearms, firearm components, and comparing casings and fired projectiles to firearms that you've done approximately?
So firearms is around, over 1,300. Cartridge cases somewhere in the range of 16 or 18,000, and bullets, 3 to 5,000.
So well over 20,000 items of evidence you've compared or analyzed over your career.
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to testify as an expert in the comparison of these items in court before?
Yes, I have.
And how many times have you done that, ma'am?
Over 130 times.
Were you assigned back in 2018 any items to analyze and to compare from a Flagler County case, and specifically your case number 2018-04-02173?
Yes, I was.
And what were you initially, how do you receive those items? How do they come to you? Do you go and pick them up from Flagler, or do they bring them to you? How does that work?
So the way that our laboratory works is that all evidence has to be submitted into the evidence section, and there's particular people who are assigned to work there, and they accept the items of evidence, check to make sure that everything is sealed at that time, make sure that all of the requests are assigned properly in the database. As they take those evidence items in, they're assigned an FDLE item number, and all of that goes under an FDLE laboratory number. Those items are then placed in the vault, and once the file is ready to be assigned, then the person who is assigned, in this case me, goes down to the evidence section to retrieve those items of evidence.
Do you recall about when you got these items of evidence to begin your analysis?
Around April of 2018.
Obviously, this happened April 7th, 2018. I would assume it was after the date of the murder.
The items of evidence were submitted to the laboratory on the 19th of April, and I started my examination after that.
Let's talk about, first of all, you talked about you kind of do a comparison of different items of what we call a cartridge to determine if that's maybe fired from a specific gun. I'm going to put up an exhibit. I want you to just, do you mind stepping down to talk to the jury? Judge, may I have the witness step down? You're right. Can we switch the podium? And I'm just going to show you for demonstrative purposes only. We'll mark it as States 1. Can I have you step over there? And you got to talk really loud because we don't have a microphone. So can you explain to the jury what we're looking at here and explain to them the different parts of a bullet that would be needed to know for this testimony?
Okay, so on the screen we'll have our 3 cross sections of different cartridges, and a cartridge is a single unit of ammunition which has 4 main components. One is the bullet. So sometimes people will call a bullet a projectile or a slug in layman's terms, but I'm going to refer to anything that looks like this as a bullet. And then this portion here is the cartridge case, and the cartridge case contains all of the other items. Then we have the gunpowder or propellant, which is located inside the cartridge case behind the projectile. And then here, although it's difficult to see, this is actually a separate unit, and this is a primer cup. So the primer cup contains a small amount of an explosive. So when the cartridge is fired in a firearm, you have to have a blow from the rear, from the firing pin. When the explosive, which is about here, it's actually really covering the whole thing, but the explosive that's here will be crushed between the anvil and the primer cup from the force of the firing pin, and then that small explosion will actually ignite the gunpowder, which will begin to burn under its own oxygen source, and then the bullet will begin to move out of the cartridge case. So again, bullet, cartridge case, gunpowder, which would be consumed during firing, and then the primer cup.
So let's talk specifically in our examination, which you did in this case. You would compare the bullet. You can compare the bullet to the actual firearm.
So as a matter of fact, I compare bullets to bullets. So when comparing items to attempt to determine whether that firearm was used, then I would test fire that firearm, collect the bullets from that test fire, and then compare my test fires to an item of evidence. And likewise with the cartridge case, I don't compare the cartridge cases directly to the gun. I need to compare the cartridge cases to test fires or casts from that gun.
I understand, but the 2 components that we're going to work with here, so the jury understands, is the bullet and then the cartridge case. And I know in specific terms you're not comparing the bullet or the cartridge case to the gun, but you circumspectly you're basically making that comparison by a sample that you have a known sample that you get from the gun of the case, of the cartridge case, and a known sample of the bullet, and then you compare those to the actual ones that you have as pieces of evidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and again, the primer cup is contained within the cartridge case. So after firing, it stays there. So any marks which are left on the primer, any marks which are left on the case can be used for comparison.
And just maybe if we can elaborate on that. So I can have you, can you step up here, ma'am? I'm going to show you what is in evidence that states, just for purposes, let's see, this is states 9. Judge, may I have her step up here with me for a moment? Thank you, sir. Just if we can for the jury, I know we don't have a good picture of it, but what would this be right here?
So this item and the item to the left are both fire cartridge cases.
And I just want to illustrate, we'll get specific our case, but you were talking that basically the firing pin would hit the back of the cartridge case. Can you explain what you meant by that? Would it leave marks there?
Yes, so there's writing here, which is the head stamp, and that's their pre-firing. That's to indicate the manufacturer or the marketer of the ammunition. It also contains information about the caliber. And then the small silver portion that you can see within the more yellow or brass colored portion is the primer cup. And then you can actually see the firing pin impression there as a small indentation. There's also breech face marks. So the firing pin is the portion that comes forward and strikes the cartridge. The breech face of the firearm is the portion that supports the cartridge during firing so that it doesn't come back out of the chamber. Because you have forward pressure on the bullet, you need something to resist the rearward pressure on the cartridge case. So as the cartridge case comes back slightly within the chamber, then it's going to be marked by the breech face. But as I said, there's a firing pin impression which you can see, and then there are breech face marks which would be more difficult to see with the naked eye. Really in the microscope to discern.
And I can have you sit back down. And so just so we understand, obviously most of the time when you do your examination, you use microscopes or basically side-by-side microscopes where you actually lay one item next to each other, and then you have an ability to closely examine them next to each other?
Yes. So during comparison, we can observe some class characteristics without the use of a microscope. But when we're actually comparing one cartridge case to another, we're looking for individual characteristics. So it's a pattern of markings that are left on the cartridge case or the bullet by the firearm that fired it. And the equipment that we use is called a comparison microscope, and it has two separate stages or places where we can place the item of evidence while we're comparing it, and then two separate sets of optics or lenses. And then those separate sets of optics are connected by an optical bridge so that we can view both of those items of evidence in the same field of view at the same time.
Let's talk about specifically what we received in this case. And I want to start with FDLE item number 3, which is also Flagler County Agency number 827.4. May I approach the witness, Judge?
You may.
I'm going to approach and show you what is in evidence of State 7. We were just, can you just look at this, see if you can recognize if this is item number 3, and then if we can explain what all these items are to the jury.
So this is item number 4. Which is cartridges. But this is also item number 4, which I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is FDLE item number 3, and then these are cartridge cases, cartridges, and bullets, which have either been fired in the firearm or cycled through the firearm.
Now, this kind of gun, what kind of gun is this? That's item number 3.
So item number 3 is a 9mm Luger caliber semi-automatic pistol. Semi-automatic pistol means that this firearm will expel a projectile each time that the trigger is pulled and then released. You must release the trigger between each shot for a semi-automatic pistol. As long as there is a cartridge in the chamber to begin with, and as long as there is ammunition in the magazine. The manufacturer is Canik, which is a Turkish manufacturer, and I believe it's a TP9 SFX model.
This kind of firearm, when you pull the trigger and the bullet goes, let me rephrase that. If you have a gun and I pull the trigger and it's loaded with a cartridge, can you tell the jury what happens with the bullet and then what happens with the casing? We'll just separate those two out where they would go.
Sure. So, assuming again that we're already starting with the cartridge in the chamber. Once you pull the trigger, the firing pin is released, and it strikes the primer. Again, the primer explodes, igniting the gunpowder. The bullet is pushed down the barrel, out the barrel, and towards target. Some of the energy of that firing is used to extract and eject that cartridge case. So what that means is that the slide moves to the rear, the extractor, which is a small hook.
Can you, and not to, I know you know all this stuff, and I know, but for them, if you could just describe what the slide is and the extractor. If
Okay,
you don't mind
so here's the barrel, and then this is the muzzle end where the bullet would leave. This portion is the slide, and that is the portion that is going to move to the rear. The extractor is located here, and then the chamber is just the most rearward portion of the barrel where the cartridge rests prior to being fired. So as the slide moves to the rear, this small hook hangs onto that cartridge case after it is fired and pulls it out. And at a certain point during that retraction, the cartridge case is going to strike the ejector, which is a small post. And as it strikes that ejector, it's going to rotate around the cartridge case and be flung out of the firearm through the ejection port.
So in lay terms, like if I pull the trigger, the bullet should go out the barrel if it operates correctly, and then the actual casing should fly out the side. I know it's a little more complicated than that, but it should just shoot out the side.
Yes.
This specific gun, did you receive this gun to do some analysis to see if it compared to any projectiles? We'll start with projectiles first.
Yes.
And I know you explained before to the jury how you do your analysis, but if you can just explain a little bit more about what you did to get a sample of a specific projectile or bullet that you were able to compare to the bullet we have.
So this firearm, there was an initial examination done to check for defects in the firearm, make sure that nothing appears to be broken or malfunctioning. Because obviously if I'm going to test fire it, I want to make sure that I'm safe. And following that initial examination and finding no major defects or malfunctions, I selected laboratory ammunition initially. And so we have a supply of ammunition in our laboratory which is intended for use during casework and which we can use to test fire firearms that we receive. And so initially that was the ammunition that I used. I loaded cartridges into the magazine, which is this portion here. Some people may know the magazine as a clip, but I would refer to this as a magazine. And the firearm was taken into our laboratory range where we have a water tank. And the firearm was aimed into the water tank so that the bullets would be slowed down by that water so they arrive relatively undamaged at the other end and can be used for comparison. And then the cartridge cases were collected after they were ejected from the firearm.
So you got two samples there that you could use. You got the bullet that you could use to compare to another bullet, but you also got cartridge cases that you could use to compare to other cartridge cases.
Yes.
Okay. Let's start with the bullets in this case. Well, if you could just describe to the jury what these extra items are right here.
So, as I said, this is all laboratory ammunition that was selected. This bullet and this cartridge case were from a submitted cartridge that was submitted in FDLIA Item 4 or Agency Item 827.5. And that was done because I did not have ammunition that was sufficiently similar to this cartridge. In other words, I didn't have something which appeared to be of the same exact material or same exact design. So when we have bullets and cartridge cases, the best samples are usually ammunition that are very similar to what was used in the initial case, because differences in material or differences in pressure can affect the quality and quantity of the marks that will be left. So this is an additional test fire, and then these are cartridges that were more or less just visually examined just to make a record of the type of head stamp that was there, the type of bullet that was there, and just to get a general description of what it is.
So, and we've connected that up with the crime scene tech, that was the ammunition that was originally with the gun when it was found. Let's talk about when a bullet is shot out of a barrel of a gun. Can you just explain to the jury, like, what happens as the bullet is going through the barrel that causes it to allow you to be able to identify it to other bullets that may have been fired from that gun?
So the markings that we use for comparison are called rifling engravings. Rifling is a set of helical grooves, which is either impressed or cut in the inside of a barrel. And what those grooves do is that as the bullet travels down the barrel, it causes the bullet to spin. And so much as a spinning football will travel straighter and farther, so is true for a bullet. So this rifling, again, imparts spin to the bullet, and the bullet will travel truer to the target versus something that is tumbling in flight. What that means for us, though, is that as the bullet is engaging with that rifling and moving against the inside surface of that barrel, the barrel is going to leave striated marks on the bullet, and the microscopic imperfections in the surface on the inside of the barrel will leave a different pattern on bullets that are that have traveled through it versus bullets that have traveled through the barrel of another firearm, even one of the same make and model.
So just so we're clear, so the jury understands, if you and I both go and purchase the same sort of Glock 9mm, it came from the same factory, everything, there still is imperfections in each one of those barrels that would allow you, if it was a good sample, to be able to distinguish which firearm it was fired from?
Yes.
Okay. In this case, you already talked about it. You did a test fire. Did you compare the test fire from item number 3? And I'm going to show you states 9. Did you compare the bullet from 3, the test fired bullet, to what would be FDLE's 12?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell us what you saw about it and whether or not you were able to make a match?
So, States Exhibit 9, FDLE Item 12, is actually 3 separate pieces. One is the majority of a portion of a bullet, and then the other 2 pieces are separate pieces of jacket fragments. And so each of those pieces was compared microscopically with my test fires, in other words, bullets that I know where they came from because I fired them from that gun. And based on that comparison, my determination or opinion is that all 3 of those pieces display a sufficient correspondence of those patterns to say that they were fired from that gun.
And so, just so we're clear, your examination compared, if you don't mind holding that there. So your examination compared this gun to States 9, FDLE 12, and you determined in your opinion that it was a match?
Yeah.
Now, let's talk, thank you ma'am, let's talk a little bit more about those 3 fragments. I know you're not a fracture, is that the word?
Fracture match.
Fracture match expert, but in your opinion, in just looking at those 3 fragments together, was there any correspondence or something that you could see that looked like to a layperson that they look like they may be from the same one bullet?
So, and again, qualifying that I can't, because I'm not an expert in fracture match, I really can't give it an opinion that they were part of the same item at one point. What I can tell you is that if you look at the entirety of the surface of what would be there for a bullet, and you think about, okay, I have this piece, and then I would need to have this piece, and I would need to have this piece, then there shouldn't be any overlap of the markings that are left on this piece for this piece. So in other words, I shouldn't have this, because that would mean that that was part of 2 different bullets. So if we look at the edges where it's torn away, the contours of those edges more or less look similar, and there is no overlap of the markings as you go around what would have been the surface of an entire bullet. So I can't say that it was 1 bullet, but it certainly could have been 1 bullet based on there's no overlap, and if you look at the torn edges, they look similar.
And they all have markings as they would have come from states 7 and then FDLE number 3?
Correct. So in other words, each comparison is based on rifling engravings on each of the individual items and not collectively. So tests were compared with, I called them A, B, and C. Tests were compared with A, that was identified. Tests were compared with B, that was identified. And tests were compared with C, and that was identified using different parts of the test bullets.
Let's go back to now state 7 again. And in state 7, the next step was you had received, let me give you the exact numbers. It would have been FDLE number 5 and number 6. Those were 2 cartridge cases, is that correct?
Yes.
And your next but your next part of your examination was to try and compare those cartridge cases to a known standard cartridge case from this Canik gun, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you, once again, you had that known because you had previously shot the bullet into the water tank. And then once that happened, obviously you watched the casing get expelled from the gun?
Yes.
Did you collect that casing for comparison?
Yes.
When you compared that casing that you knew came from this Canik gun to number, do you mind holding this? To what would have been FDLE number 5 and number 6, were you able to make a comparison as to whether or not those went to this gun?
Yes.
And, okay, so take this down from you. Can you explain to the jury how you made the comparison that number 5 and number 6 match up to the Canik gun?
So much as we're looking at the striations on bullets, we can look at, with cartridge cases, either an impressed pattern or a striated pattern. It just depends on what marks are left. In this case, the comparison was based on primarily the firing pin mark. In other words, as the firing pin comes forward, it leaves that indentation, and there's a pattern of marks within that impression. And it is the correspondence of that pattern of marks within the firing pin mark that I used in this case. And again, based on a correspondence of that pattern, it's my opinion that these 2 cartridge cases were fired in the submitted Canik pistol, FDLE item 3.
And just so we're clear, just like before, even if myself and you and I both had the same Glock gun, there's still some individual characteristics in the firing pins that would be able to delineate between the 2 guns, and that's how you can make that match?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. When a bullet is shot and it travels, if that bullet hits wood, metal, concrete, can that change the trajectory of the bullet?
Yes.
Have you yourself fired ammunition multiple times and maybe even at targets or other items, and you've seen the change in trajectory from them?
Yes.
Now on the, I want to show you states 7 again, which is the Canik FDLE number 3. Can you describe any sort of safety mechanisms that are built into this gun, or what kind of safety features it may have?
So this firearm has 2 main safeties. The first is a trigger safety, and the second is a firing pin block. The way that the trigger safety works is that the majority of the trigger cannot move until the trigger safety is depressed. And the trigger safety is actually located on the trigger, so I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but there's actually two separate pieces that are moving there, and the larger of the two pieces, the one that actually connects with all of the firing mechanism, cannot move until that trigger safety is depressed. Likewise, the trigger bar, which is connected to the trigger, has a small projection on it which presses the firing pin block up and out of the way. So the firing pin cannot move forward until the trigger is depressed and until the trigger bar interacts with the firing pin block. So in other words, the firing pin cannot reach the cartridge unless and until the trigger is depressed. So it's designed to be safer to carry, in other words, or to prevent firing really unless and until you pull the trigger.
So, if I just drop the gun on the floor, those safety mechanisms should prevent it from firing off. Is that correct?
Yeah, in other words, if you would have to override both of those safeties or have both of those safeties get stuck at the same time in order for the firing pin to reach it at any point in time, including when it's dropped.
I'm going to show you what it is. 6DD, ma'am. And I want you to just take a look at that item. Did you originally have an opportunity also to examine, this would have been FDLE item number 1, Agency 827.2, a 9mm Beretta PX4 Storm model?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm showing you a photograph of how that was found at the scene by the law enforcement. If I can show you right here, do you see the cartridge case or the cartridge itself right here?
Yeah, you can see the cartridge case, or what appears to be the cartridge case.
Can you explain to the jury what's going on there as best as you can? Not how it happened, but what's happening.
So what that appears to be is that you have the extractor engaged with the rim of the cartridge case. The cartridge should feed forward along with the magazine because there's a recoil spring which pushes that slide forward. And obviously I can't testify to how this got that way, but I mean, assuming that we're not supporting that slide in some way, then it appears that the cartridge is wedged at the back of the chamber. So the way that this usually happens is that either on the way in, we're not feeding at the appropriate angle, or there's something about the cartridge case that is catching at the back of the chamber, and so it lodges forward and gets stuck. Or we didn't complete extraction and ejection. You don't have to fire every cartridge once it's in the chamber. You can actually pull the live cartridge back out again by manually cycling the slide. So if it was on the way in, then it fed forward and got stuck. If it was on the way out, then extraction and ejection wasn't complete, and then as the slide moved forward again, it got stuck again, it wouldn't have been at the right angle to feed again.
Ultimately, though, this is Flagler County Item 827.2, and then this cartridge case, and then 12 other ammunition or cartridge cases. Were they all sent to you to look at and do an examination of?
So I don't know, obviously, or I don't have any knowledge of the provenance of the scene, but I did receive 13 9mm Luger caliber cartridges submitted as FDLE item 2.
And let's talk about that. And obviously, we've connected it up with crime scene. So just let's talk about those items. Were you asked to review those 13 cartridge cases and see cartridges? I'm sorry, cartridges. Were you asked to look at those to see if any of them looked like they had been fired? Meaning that could this? Well, let's see. Did you look at all 13 of those cartridge cases to see whether or not there was any indication that they had been fired, meaning the fire pin hit them and propelled them forward?
So it wasn't necessarily a specific request, but it is something that I'll be looking for during taking my notes and documentation. So in this case, there was no indication of a firing pin impression indicating that either they had been attempted to be fired or that somehow the firing pin had come in contact. So there wasn't any firing pin impressions on any of the 13.
Yes, ma'am. And this is right here was previously established as being 827.3, and I guess this is your FDLE 2. That being the fact of that, if this was a complete cartridge case, would you agree that that wouldn't have got into that position by the gun being fired? That it couldn't have because the firing pin didn't, interact with the back of any of those 13 cartridge cases that you looked at?
So, yeah, this particular cartridge case was not fired, or this particular cartridge was not fired because there's no firing pin impression. Again, assuming that that's one of the 13.
Yes, ma'am.
But again, if you're not firing the cartridge, then you're not igniting the gunpowder, and you don't have that expansion of gas, and you don't have any energy from that to move the slide in any way.
Understand.
So the slide isn't going to move just by having a cartridge in the chamber and not firing it.
And I just want to, so the jury understands and explain it, that this cartridge case did not get in that jammed position by someone pulling the trigger and starting the process of a bullet going through the through the front of the barrel and then the cartridge case being ejected.
Yeah, assuming that this is a cartridge, then no.
Oh, yes, ma'am. And obviously you've connected it up, and you looked at 13 cartridges that came with that. When you received FDLE number 1, did it coordinate with FDLE number 2 in any way? Like, were you able to connect up that those were 2 items that were connected?
The only indication that I have from that was from our case tracking form, which is essentially an inventory of the items that were submitted and the different requests. So it's listed as 9mm cartridges from Beretta handgun in the item description.
And we've already seen 6 TT. Can you see that right there, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. So 6 TT, that corresponds with FDLE number 1 and number 2. We've connected that up with the prior folks. Can you look at, with crime scene, can you look at TT and these, first off, these 12 cartridge cases or ammunition, do those all look like they have not been fired?
Those have not been fired.
Okay. And then looking at SS, which is that same firearm we were looking at before in this one cartridge case, does that look like that's an unfired cartridge case?
The single.
The single,
item,
yes, ma'am.
It still has the bullet. It's, again, assuming that it's the same one that I looked at, it is not fired.
May I have just a moment, Judge? And just so you explained it, but I just want to be clear. In FDLE number 3, which is state 7, this cannon firearm that the two casings came out of and the bullet that you were able to match up to this gun, I know we all see on TV, but if I pull the trigger one time and I hold it, would that allow 2 bullets to come out?
No.
What has to occur in order for a second bullet to come out of the gun?
So semi-automatic pistols, by definition, have some form of a disconnector, and the disconnector means that the firing mechanism is caught until you release the trigger. And so when you release the trigger, now all of the normal parts of the firing mechanism are re-engaged and ready to fire. But each shot requires a separate pull and release, and pull and release, and pull and release of the trigger.
So it's not possible, in your expertise, that I pull this trigger once and this gun and 2 bullets fly out the front?
Not with this firearm.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Judge. No further questions.
Cross?
All right, we're going to slip in a break right before cross-examination, get you back into court right after this. Firearms expert on the stand. Time for cross-examination, get you back into court.
Morning.
Good morning.
I want to follow up on some questions of my own. Did you, at some point, receive for review and analysis what would be your item number 25, agency exhibit number 827.77, which is represented as a one-fired bullet?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jury what kind of bullet that was?
So the bullet is a very lightweight polymer green bullet. A lot of people would call it a rubber bullet, but it's some form of a polymer or plastic.
Okay. And is it your understanding from the records you received, the receipts you received, that that was a bullet that was recovered from the decedent in this case?
Based on the packaging and the case tracking form, yes.
Okay. Now, can a green, can a rubber bullet, whatever color it may be fired from a 9mm cartridge?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to determine from your analysis, at some point you did compare and do an analysis on that rubber bullet, the green rubber bullet, to one of the cartridge cases that you received in this case, did you not?
So I think what you're asking me is, did I compare the submitted bullet to a test fire from the Canic?
Yes.
Yes, I did compare the bullet to a test fire, and again, it was a later test fire in a later submission using submitted ammunition, but not one of the ones that was on the board previously shown.
Okay.
And that submitted ammunition was of a similar type, which was from a different exhibit. So again, because I compare bullet to bullet, and because the material will dictate the quality and quantity of marks, I selected another cartridge from a different exhibit that was also submitted that had a rubber bullet. And so I compared my test fire to that bullet.
Okay. And were you able to conclusively determine if that was fired, that bullet was fired from the Canic?
No, there was not sufficient correspondence of the individual characteristics or the striations that were left on that rubber bullet to say conclusively that it was fired from that firearm.
Just out of curiosity, what is the, if you would call it trigger pull weight? What's the trigger pull weight? Maybe I'm not using the right or poundage to depress the trigger on the Canic.
So I did not determine that in this case.
Okay. And what I've referred to, and just for educating the jury, what I'm talking about is how hard or how easy or hard it is to, or how much force is needed to depress the trigger in the Canic. Have I basically stated that correctly?
Right, so trigger pull is the amount of force required to release the firing mechanism. We used to do that determination based on armorer's weights. However, because of some requirements of our accreditation, we've moved to a different measuring system. And that system, which is called, I think, the trigger scan, is done in a different laboratory at FDLE because it's not a request that is done routinely. It's only done at the request of the agency. So, I mean, I can say that I didn't notice any issues with this firearm at the time that I fired it, that it was excessively heavy or excessively light, but I didn't actually make a determination as to the actual amount of force required for this firearm to fire.
Now, Mr. Lewis did ask you, sort of at the beginning of your testimony, about the process, focusing on the Canic for a moment. And I don't know if I'm saying that right, Canic or Canic, but the 9mm. You described the process as once the bullet is fired, goes through the barrel, the casing then gets ejected from the gun. Is that correct?
That's the way that it's designed to work, yes.
Okay. And would the ejection of the spent bullet casing go to the left or the right from that gun?
So, again, I didn't make any notation at the time. However, the Canic has an extractor on the right-hand side, an ejector on the left-hand side. It's designed to eject more or less generally to the right.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else. Thank you very much.
Just real quickly, Jeff. We'll call it the rubber bullet. Did you have difficulty comparing those because the surface of the rubber bullet as it goes through the barrel of the gun doesn't really make enough good markings for you to compare from one to the other?
In short, yes.
Okay, so can you explain to the jury why there might have been some difficulty in comparing the rubber green bullet to the test-fired, I guess, green bullet you had?
So to understand that, you have to think about pressure and how bullets behave inside of the barrel. So with, very, very old guns, you would load it from the muzzle, right? Everybody's probably seen in movies where you load it down, you drop the bullet down the barrel and then you ram it down to the end. Well, those bullets had to be smaller than bore diameter, otherwise you'd never get it back to the other end. Modern ammunition is, generally speaking, of a slightly larger diameter, or it's designed in such a way that the base of the bullet with pressure behind it will flare out a little bit, and so you'll have this backward pressure which is more or less deforming the bullet at the base and forces it out into that rifling. Part of that that you have to understand is that a bullet has mass, and given that it has mass and it's at rest within the firearm, it has inertia, so there's a resistance to movement, and so it's being pushed and it's being accelerated. When you have the rubber bullet, number one, the material is more plastic. So with metal, you have plastic and elastic deformation. Plastic means that when you deform it, it more or less stays there, versus elastic deformation means that you deform it and then it kind of pops back. So with plastic, you don't have the same kind of quote-unquote plastic deformation, that as the plastic is deformed, it actually reacts more elastically, that those markings are not really taken up by that plastic like they are the gilding metal of a jacket. So gilding metal, sorry, is just a form of brass. It's the portion that the outer part of the bullet is made of. So we're kind of working with two issues here. One is that the plastic bullet is much lighter weight, so there's less resistance to accelerating that bullet. And then the other is that the material itself doesn't behave the same way inside the barrel. So my tests were not very well marked with respect to the rifling engravings, and the evidence bullet was also not very well marked. Given that both items were not very well marked, I didn't see any correspondence of those patterns, simply because there wasn't much of a pattern to compare.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sorry, next witness.
State recalls Investigator Quinteri.
Okay, they're bringing the lead investigator back on the stand. Arick Fudali is with us from New York. Arick, the ballistics, do they really matter in this case now that the defendant is saying, oh, I shot her? He's admitting it. Still need to bring the expert on, but not as crucial as maybe another trial.
I agree with you. So, certainly, as a trial attorney, you always wish you could just get the expert to just give the ultimate conclusion and then move on to the next witness. But it is important. You have to sort of methodically take the jury through the process so that there's no holes, there's nothing missing, and that you can have a very clean record as to what the expert's opinion is and how they got there. And ultimately, I think the prosecutor did a good job here, especially with the two-shot thing, showing that there could not have been two bullets coming from the gun with one pull of the trigger. I thought that was really important because that sort of ruins a couple of their defenses, especially, the evidence is that she was shot twice. So if it was self-defense, why did he need to shoot her twice? Which I ultimately think the prosecutors will end up explaining to the jury during cross-examination or during the closing argument.
All right, let's get you back in. We are expecting the videos that were taken before this to be shown to the jury now, the behavior, the odd behavior that the defendant and his wife engaged in.
Via FedEx on April 27th.
Yes.
Okay. And between that time, obviously you talked to him on the 7th into the 8th. We mentioned another time. He had some other interactions with the sheriff's office about these videos specifically. Is that right?
Yes.
Arlo. Okay. And was the sheriff's office trying to get access to that account via Mr. Johansson?
Yes, we were.
Okay. And what were you guys asking him to do and to provide?
To provide a username and password. The program itself can be accessed via an app with a username and password.
Okay. And did he ever provide that information successfully?
No, he did not.
Okay. So your agency had no idea the content of these videos until you received them from Arlo?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you received that package from the Arlo Corporation, did you have an opportunity to review the videos in their entirety?
Yes, I did.
And what dates did Arlo provide video from? And if you could go by date and how many files came for each date?
So we had April 3rd, 2018, where there were 2 video clips. April 4th, 2018, where there was 1 video clip. And then April 5th, 2018, where there were 85 video clips. None from April 6th, 2018, and then April 7th, 2018, there was 154 video clips.
Did you review 2 discs of selected video clips from April 5th and from April 7th that were prepared for court today?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Just so the record's clear, Your Honor, may I approach?
May.
Mr. Terry, I'm just going to show you what's already been introduced into evidence through Mr. Bussey as states 14 and 15, but take a look at these and let me know if you recognize them as something you've reviewed.
Yes, ma'am, they are.
Okay. And other than, again, some redactions or modifications made for court, are these accurate video clips of what you received from the Arlo Corporation?
Yes, they are.
Now, when you received information from Arlo, did it tell you how to determine a date and time from these files?
Yes, it did. So the actual file name itself, though it doesn't look like it, is the date and time for the videos. We actually had to upload the file name into what we termed as either an epoch or epoch time converter, and the file name itself would provide the actual date and time in Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. And Your Honor, permission to publish a series of videos. And for the record, I'm going to start with states 14, which is going to be a series of video clips from April 5th, 2018. And Investigator Quinteri, I'm going to ask you, and if it's okay, Your Honor, I know you have some notes there about the file names in order to testify to the jury the date and time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have to look down at your notes, does she have permission to do so, Your Honor?
To refresh her recollection?
Yes.
Yes.
And Judge, before these are published again, we would ask that 2.2 be read.
Members of the jury, you're about to view and listen to an audio and video recording. The court instructs you that the recording has been edited to eliminate irrelevant portions that would not add to your understanding of the case. The fact that the recording has been edited should not concern you in any way and must not impact the way you view and listen and consider this evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Investigator Quinteri, before we show the videos, in your review of the videos in their entirety, can you explain what evidentiary value the videos on the 5th provided? Just some context to the fighter argument that's going on in these videos.
Yes, so on April 5th, the videos depict that the defendant and the victim engage in mutual masturbation on multiple occasions. And while they're engaging in those acts, it appears that the defendant is actively on a laptop computer in the middle of the bed. And as these acts are going on, the defendant is threatening to kill the victim on multiple occasions, threatening to beat her, threatening to have someone else kill her. And it pretty much continues for a series of about 5 hours.
Okay. And so obviously we've only selected some for court. You're talking about the entirety of those 85 files that's going on
Yes.
for those 5+ hours. And what is the substance of that fight from the defendant's words? What can you tell?
So it appears that the fight stemmed from, so the mutual masturbation goes a little bit further. It appears that the defendant and the victim would often masturbate on the internet and upload videos onto the internet of either her just masturbating by herself, but for some reason the defendant became angry at one point, either because the victim uploaded videos without his knowledge or was masturbating while he was not home or aware that she was doing it.
And it's going to become relevant in one of these videos we'll discuss, but during some of the masturbation that you viewed, both for court purposes and videos that are not being published here today, were sex toys sometimes used by Ms. Salenza?
Yes, they were.
Okay. With that being said, Ms. Quinteri, I'm going to publish the video that ends, so I'm going to use the last 4 digits for the court, 0561. What, again, these are all on April 5th. What time is this video begin?
It begins at 5:34 and 10 seconds p.m.
Okay.
So bad. Thanks. Last time. Hey, that. So I'm gonna go to sleep and hopefully I don't wake up.
Somewhere so you can be alone?
I want you to go. To the bar, do your thing. Leave me the fuck alone, dude. Be my roommate, I say. I can't deal with eyes all the time.
Like that's what you want. You want me to leave to just go to a bar. Yeah.
Huh? You do it alone. Don't.
Yeah, on your side, yeah, I do on your side because we do it together, but you put me on there, not myself.
Do what you do. Okay. It's not. Because I don't allow you to hurt me anymore. I like. I can't have it. Your drinks up. That's it. And maybe. What can I do? Maybe. I'll never come back. Maybe I'll die. I don't care right now. It's none of my concerns. Makes me sick. But now that I think of how many hundreds of
How many?
right next to me, you fucking sick
Hundreds
cunt.
of times? Like, really?
2 years? When? Right next to me, you
You gotta have it.
Be faithful. Yeah, that's the problem. Where were you from? Oh, now, one now, useless woman. Five so-called good girls are all older and.
Oh, it's in the paper. The paper, they have locals you can call. Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell you.
I thought
They
I put
have
them on the list.
personals. Go for it.
No, I'm gonna take them.
Go for it.
I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. Period. You boss that girl. So you might as well do it. Or don't. Come here. Computer's a kid. I'm serious, dude. Like, you don't know how serious this is. You act like it's fun.
I'm not acting like.
Obviously,
How am I
you think it's
acting like
okay to do. Obviously, you like doing it.
Obviously, this time and the
Obviously.
time before that, the time before that, I haven't done anything. Did I or did I not? You complimented. You were like, you're doing
You
it.
can feel better at hiding it.
No, that's. How you.
Your Honor, do you have a volume control up there too that you can tick up a little bit? Just a little bit, yeah. And so, Ms. Quinteri, that video you said was at 5:34. That was sort of the beginning of this 5-hour period that happened to be captured on video. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the next video is going to end in 5816. What time do we pick up for the next video?
This is 8:34 and 45 seconds in the PM.
Okay. Similar arguments and things going on between 5:30 and 8:30. Was that constant based on your review of the videos?
Objection, Your Honor, that violates the best evidence rule. It's not in evidence. She can't comment on what may or may not be in other videos.
Sustain.
And Investigator Quinteri, obviously for the record, you've reviewed this video. It's being censored for purposes of court. But what is going on in this video, if you could describe it?
The victim is actively masturbating, and then towards the end of the video, the defendant is also masturbating.
Okay. Your Honor, are you able to turn it up at all?
There may be a sound bar in PowerPoint too.
Oh, you mean in a bed watching porn? Or chatting to some slut?
I really didn't.
Ever had time off? In the mornings when I wouldn't take a shower? Yeah. So that if you didn't go to the bathroom and, talk to girls and do whatever you did, act like it.
But
Because at least then you can fucking lie yourself.
it wasn't all the time.
No, it's just like you used to fucking wake up and do that.
I still
On
think.
the night, wait for me to sleep.
No.
Oh, right next to me still. Nice.
No, I wouldn't.
You wake up. Yes. No, then I'll come back and give you a ride home. I'll give you what you want. You shouldn't have wished for this. Like I'm a wrench on this. Come on, man. I want to know everybody that you did it with. Who, when, how, why? And you really had no reason why. It was always there. You just didn't like it. You wanted more. Got over with it. And, see, you want to be yourself on this?
All right, as the jury continues to watch and listen to a bizarre home video, security footage in the defendant's home capturing bizarre behavior. Arick Fudali, does this make it more difficult for the prosecution in that the victim in this case is also acting in a bizarre manner and maybe be different than the lifestyles of most of these jurors? And then you add the fact that there was potential drug use and meth found in her system. Does it help the defense, this behavior?
I'm not sure it helps the defense, and I certainly agree with your word choice there, using the word bizarre. You know, one thing I did note, and it was difficult to make out a lot what was being said, but there seemed to be so much hatred, you know, in the tone of defendant's voice. Clearly didn't appear to be any, you know, love between, you know, the two in the conversations. It's very bizarre. The conversation is very disturbing. The interaction is disturbing. So I'm not sure it really helps the defense, other than it certainly establishes an odd relationship between the two. But ultimately, hearing the way that the defendant is speaking to his wife and in the circumstances of which he's doing it, also the fact that there's surveillance all over the house that would pick up these conversations and these acts, the whole thing is so bizarre that I'm not sure this evidence is really going to help anyone other than perhaps the prosecution, which already has such a mountain of evidence.
What about the meth in her system? The allegation from the defense that we're expecting to hear out of the defendant's mouth when he takes the stand is that she was on meth and was hallucinating, saying I wasn't her husband, and pulls a gun and was going to shoot me. I had to shoot her.
Right, that might be some compelling evidence if we didn't have the three other stories that the defendant has already tried and failed to allege. Right? I mean, if that was the beginning, if in the beginning the first police call was, you know, my wife attacked me, she was crazy on drugs, and I had to shoot her to protect myself, and that was continually the defense, there might be a decent defense there and a decent chance for an acquittal. But the fact that the defendant has changed his story so many times, basically just, you know, Hail Marys of maybe it was the stepson, maybe it was a neighbor, no, she shot herself twice while I was in the shower. You know, if we didn't have that leading into this defense, maybe I would give more weight to that defense.
Yeah.
But at this point in the trial, I don't see it being very compelling.
All right, Arick Fudali, thank you for your expertise. Really appreciate it. We're going to step aside and take a break. Coming up, top of the hour, Julie Grant's going to be here. We're also going to take you to New Mexico for the Santa Fe Sheriff's Department's news conference, the latest on the tragic shooting involving the movie that Alec Baldwin was a part of. There's the podium. We'll have it next.